Psych with Mike and Brett is now a book. Psych with Mike and Brett, A User's Guide to Being Human, is our new book that's available at Kendall Hunt, Barnes & Noble, and on Amazon. Pick up a copy today and leave a review. Also, find us on YouTube and subscribe to the podcast. That really helps us out. Now, it's time for Psych with Mike.
Hello and welcome into the Psych with Mike library. I am your host, Dr. Michael Mahan. I got married back in September of 1987, and as I say that out loud, I feel really old. But the reason that I got married, the reason that my wife and I got married, is because we were just too dumb and too stupid to know that that was a horrible idea. And yet, it's almost 40 years later, and we are still together, even though so many people in the United States get divorced. Why is that? A big part of that is because of what we're going to talk about today. If you like this kind of psychology content, then please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any of our new content. Also, share the show with somebody that you think might benefit from it, and that really helps us out. So as I said, I got married in 1987. And I was barely 22 years old. Actually, I don't think that I had my birthday yet. So we got married, and in the beginning, it was really hard. I was still, at that time, using drugs actively and hadn't really started my psychology career. So we really struggled, and we fought a lot, the same as any other couple does. But as I started to learn more about psychology, I started to figure out things that were important in relationships, and it's really helped me to be able to manage my relationship as well as counsel other people who have issues in their relationships. And so I just wanted to share that, or a piece of that, with you today. And specifically, what I want to talk about is what is an intimate relationship. So a lot of people think that they know what intimacy is. We talk about intimacy. Most people associate that with sexual encounters. That's really not true. Intimate relationships can be sexual in nature, but don't have to be. So intimate relationships are any relationship. I define intimate relationships as any relationship that has three qualities. So you have to have honesty, you have to have trust, and you have to have empathy. So any relationship that has those three qualities, honesty, trust, and empathy, is an intimate relationship, whether it's sexual or not. So a lot of us may have intimate relationships, even our most intimate relationships, that are not sexual. And some of us, the lucky few, have intimate relationships with our partners that are sexual. And so we just have to learn what intimacy is and why that's important, and that can really help us to be able to project or to move our relationships into a whole different realm that is so much more satisfying and so much higher quality than we ever could have imagined, that we are flabbergasted by those results. And so this is stuff that I share with people when I am working with them in therapy. So today we know that almost half of divorces, 47%, end in divorce. That number has been trailing down over the last couple of decades, but so have the number of marriages. So a lot of people are not getting married, or not as frequently getting married in the same proportions as they did 20 years ago. That's the bad news. The good news is that the number of divorces has also stabilized. So as we see a decrease in the number of individuals getting married, we see a concomitant decrease, happens at the same time, concomitant, in the number of individuals who are getting divorced. That's probably not a big surprise. But what that means is that a lot of people are getting married, and then they're getting divorced. And the reason is because of what I'm talking about right now, which is not really understanding an intimate relationship. So a lot of people get divorced for whatever, irreconcilable differences, whatever that means. People learn or figure out or come to a realization that they don't want to be together. Usually that's because one of them feels like that their partner isn't meeting their needs. And almost always that is going to track back to these things that we're talking about, the three qualities that make an relationship intimate. So the first thing is you got to be honest. One of the things that I would like to share is that if you ever get an email from me, you're going to see a line at the bottom of the email that says nemo.non-quad-habit. That's Latin for you can't give away what you don't have. Now, originally, this phrase was the foundation for Roman property ownership, meaning that you couldn't sell a piece of property that you did not originally own, and someone couldn't buy a piece of property from someone that didn't own that property. And that has been the mainstay of property ownership all the way to this present day, but it also applies to us as people and to our relationships. What that means is you can't give away something that you don't have. You're never going to trust someone else more than you trust yourself. You're never going to be empathetic to someone else more than you are empathetic to yourself, and you're never going to be more honest with another person than you are with yourself. And those things are stark realizations. When I tell this to people in therapy, it's usually an epiphany. Their eyes light up and they say, oh, wow, that makes all the sense in the world. And that's why it's so important for people to work on themselves before they worry about going out and working on other people. So you can't give away something you don't have. A lot of people, when they hear that, that becomes an epiphany. Their eyes light up. They say, oh, wow, that makes all the sense in the world. But they don't really know how to apply that to their relationships, because first what they have to do is correct these things for themselves before they can actually employ these new techniques and this new learning into their own relationships. So if you have issues with being honest with yourself, it's going to be almost impossible for you to be honest with other people. If you have issues with trusting yourself, it's going to be very difficult for you to trust other people. And if you can't have empathy for yourself, then it's going to be very difficult for you to have empathy for other people. So we need to try and find ways of applying these concepts to the self and then to expand that into our relationships. And number one, hopefully our most personal relationships, those intimate relationships, especially those with our significant other. One of the things that I am really concerned with today is this idea of people moving more and more online. And what does that mean for what I'm talking about, the quality of these intimate relationships? Could you possibly have an intimate relationship with an robot, with an artificial intelligence online? And the absolute, unequivocal answer to that is resoundingly no. Why can you not have an intimate relationship with someone online or an artificial intelligence? The reason for that, number one, is that for most of us, we don't really trust other people online. You might think that you do, and if you do, that's probably an issue because you don't really know this person. Like you might have a friend that you talk to online. That's a horse of a different color. You know that person in real life. If you don't know someone in real life and you're only talking to them in an electronic format and you put unequivocal trust into that person, that's probably misguided. And we know that people don't really trust others online because we have a whole cadre of terms that we use to apply to people online, like catfishing, ghosting, left on red. These are all things that people come to my office and talk about happening to them online, and that has to do with basic trust. So it's very difficult to be trustworthy to trust others online, and most of us are not actually very honest ourselves. So we know that online, in social media formats, especially things like Facebook, Instagram, things like that, people clearly misrepresent themselves and try and promote or project an image that is much more glamorous, much grander than what they actually have in their own lives. So a lot of people come to my office and they want to talk about this idea of, oh, everybody's life that I see online is so perfect. And what I say to them is, you don't know that. You don't even know these people. You see what they're posting online, and it's easy to post great pictures online when you have the ability to electronically filter them, and you have the ability to only post the things that are flattering. So if we had a camera that followed us around, like on the popular TV show Big Brother, you would get a very different perception of that person's life than the limited snapshot that you see of them online. Now, is that intentionally dishonest? Perhaps not, but it is not an accurate representation of that person. So it's very difficult for people to be honest online, and we know that anonymity breeds contempt. What does that mean? That means that when you feel anonymous in any situation, it is easier for you to be cruel and to express less empathy than if you are meeting a person in person. So less than half of the country right now trusts AI. That number is less than 40%. So that means that people have an inherent distrust of AI intelligences online, which means that it would be impossible for that individual to have an intimate relationship, including one based on psychotherapy. So a lot of people talk about they're getting their psychotherapy online. That's bad for a lot of reasons. A big part of that is that it's really hard to trust when you are talking to someone online, and that is essential. Your therapy relationship must be intimate. If it is not, and again, that's not sexual, that's just based on honesty, trust, and empathy. If your therapy relationship is not intimate, then it isn't actually therapy. It's just talking to another human being about your problems. So we have to have those three qualities: honesty, trust, and empathy, and we have to be able to have that for ourselves before we can give it away. So what is empathy? Empathy is the ability to experience the emotion of others. So sympathy is the ability to understand the emotion of others. Empathy is the ability to put yourself in another person's position and feel what they are feeling. And so we need empathy in intimate relationships. It is extremely difficult to have empathy in an online relationship because you need the nonverbal behavior for empathy to work. The biological explanation for empathy, at least one of them, is this idea of mirror neurons that allow you to mimic human behavior after a single viewing. It is what allows you to go to a sporting event and feel as though you are a part of the action because you have these mirror neurons. And that is what creates empathy in human beings. If you don't have the nonverbal behavior, then you don't have the cues that allow you to be able to have empathy, and therefore that relationship cannot have empathy by definition and therefore cannot be intimate. But again, what we want to do is to understand what these concepts are, to try and find examples of them, to work on generating and nurturing these things in ourselves so that we can then generalize that and apply it to other relationships that we have in our life. So again, if you like this content, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification button. Don't forget we have a book out, Psych with Mike and Brett, A User's Guide to Being Human. The link will be below in the description. As always, the music that appears in Psych with Mike is written and performed by Mr. Benjamin DeClue. And if it's Friday, it's Psych with Mike.